All right, I'd like to introduce Scott Kirsner, our moderator for tonight's webinar. Scott, take it away.
All right. Thank you, anonymous voice of EforAll. I'm super excited for this event, in part because I noticed that it is the longest day of the year. It's June 21st, and I think we have planned the shortest Zoom webinar of the year and maybe your life. We're going to keep this really fast-paced. My name is Scott Kirsner. I'm a longtime columnist on startups and the innovation economy for the Boston Globe. I'm really excited for the content that we have lined up tonight, focusing on the future of entrepreneurship in America. It's a really big topic. We have the co-authors of this great new book called The New Builders with us tonight, and I'm really excited about that. As a little sad, you can see the forward of this book. It was written by Tyra Banks. Tyra Banks was busy tonight, having, I guess, a longest day of the year party that she forgot to invite all of us to, but I'm glad that you're here with us. Entrepreneurship for All, EforAll, we'll hear more about it as we move forward, but it's a nonprofit organization. EforAll alumni have launched over 700 businesses now, even just in 2020 with everything that was going on during the pandemic. They provided more than 1,300 jobs and generated more than $43 million in revenue. So I'm excited for what we have planned. We really would love a lot of questions from you, and we have some polls for you. Maybe we can actually pop up the first poll, which is basically kind of a who are you poll, so that we can get a sense for who is out there in the audience tonight. But with us, we have Seth Levine and Elizabeth MacBride, who are the authors of this book, The New Builders. You should see the poll popping up there. We have EforAll founder Desh Deshpande. We have EforAll CEO David Parker. And we have EforAll South Coast entrepreneur Luis Gonsalves of Juice'd Café. So welcome to each of our panelists. Just because there's no applause ever on Zoom, I'm going to give you a big rousing round of applause. More than just an applause emoji. So we have a bunch of themes that we want to cover under this umbrella of the future of entrepreneurship. We'll have Seth jump in just a minute, but of course we want to hear from you in the comments with feedback, with questions. We're sharing the poll results. So about a third are entrepreneurs, a quarter are mentors, some are donors, some are community leaders, big other chunk. So maybe if you want to share in the chat, if you see a chat or a comment or a question window, let us know if you're in that other category, who you are. Seth, I want to turn things over to you first with the first question, because you are a big shot venture capitalist based in Boulder. 2020 was an amazing year for venture capital, right? We set records for venture capital funding of startups amidst the pandemic. This year, venture capital funding is on fire, and yet you make the case that this is actually not, that there is a crisis in entrepreneurship in America. So set the stage and tell us, what is the crisis? What are we focusing on tonight? And unmute first. Sorry, your first instruction is...
My God, well, what would a Zoom be without the please unmute? And here I was being so careful about getting my video on at the right time, and my cursor was poised to unmute, and there, of course, I forgot to hit it. Let me first start by thanking you, Scott, and thanking everyone else for coming to this event tonight. This is such a critical topic. And it's really why Elizabeth, organizations like EforAll, why Elizabeth and I wrote this book. She's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but we were incredibly inspired in our research by meeting Desh and David, Danaris, some of the other entrepreneurs that work with EforAll, which is why we ended up highlighting EforAll, and in particular Danaris, but also the story of Desh and the story of David in the book. But let me frame kind of what's going on a little bit and talk about some of the key themes of the book, because I think this is really important as we jump into this discussion. You talked about sort of the venture and tech world being on fire right now, and it's absolutely true. It's been a banner year for tech, both in terms of new investments and in terms of exits. But that doesn't really tell the picture of entrepreneurship across America, right? In the same way that the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the S&P 500 doesn't do a very good job of talking about what's really going on in our economy. So there's a couple key themes that we'll definitely hit on tonight. The first is that entrepreneurship in America is in a state of profound decline. And that's something that a lot of people don't recognize. Certainly most of our peers, when Elizabeth and I showed in the research, frankly, they just thought that was wrong. But the truth is, entrepreneurial dynamism in the United States has been slowly declining for the last 40 years, in particular in the last 15 years. The second thing, and this may be related, is that the definition of entrepreneur has been overtaken by Silicon Valley, tech entrepreneurship, venture capitalists like me. And we think that's incredibly pernicious to broadly based entrepreneurship. It used to, of course, be that entrepreneur meant anyone endeavoring to start a small business, right? Whether that was a cobbler or a farrier back in the day, or any kind of corner shop or other type of business today. But that's not the case anymore, and we'll probably touch on a little bit of the history of why that's happened. Related to that is that this idea of scale and the only businesses that are important being businesses that are either big or who can be big has taken over our mind share around entrepreneurship. And those two things are clearly related, but also a challenge, because the truth is, and we'll talk about this a ton tonight, there is a huge power in the collective economic, both power and viability, but also community involvement, et cetera, of small businesses that we think is critical to the fabric of our, not just economy, but to the fabric of our country. Additionally, the face of entrepreneurship is changing very significantly. Desh and David obviously understood this, because this is what EforAll does. But it turns out that the people that are starting businesses today are much more likely to be female. They're much more likely to be Black. They're much more likely to be people of color. And as they always have been, much more likely to be immigrants. And these are trends that are just accelerating. The fastest growing segment of new entrepreneur, new business owner, are Black women. And then lastly is a concept that we wove throughout the book, and again, should be familiar to anyone who knows EforAll, but that's the importance of community in place. Entrepreneurs build their businesses, new builders, as we call them, build their businesses in the context of their community, and they become community leaders and community heroes. And really kind of help stitch together this fabric of community that we talk about. And that's incredibly important. And we risk losing that as we lose the entrepreneurial dynamism in our economy, and as we lose more and more new builders. So with that, I should probably turn it over to my co-author, Elizabeth, to kind of frame the connection to EforAll a little bit more thoroughly. And now you're on mute. See, I wasn't the only one.
All right, it's the theme of the night.
She did that on purpose to make me feel good. Let's just be clear.
I do try and do that, Seth. So let's see, to make the connection for EforAll, well, I feel that what I want to do is tell the story of Danaris Mazzara, who can't be with us tonight, although we're going to hear from another founder from EforAll, who I'm sure has a compelling story too. So Danaris Mazzara is a baker in Lawrence, Massachusetts, but the story of the founding of her bakery starts in 2008 during the Great Recession. And I'm seeing people making some comments now about the fact that women start businesses after recessions, and that's why we're seeing so many of them now. And that is true, right? Women are very driven by economic necessity, I think. And so that's what happened with Danaris. Her husband had lost a job. And she was working a factory job at Samsung, and she had a newborn baby. And they had already declared bankruptcy, and their house had been foreclosed on. They were in a rental property, and they really didn't have enough to meet their bills. And she was lying on the couch. Her mother had dropped $37 in food stamps off that day to try and help her out. And she was lying on the couch thinking, what am I going to do with $37 in food stamps? And at that moment, a voice came into her head. She's a religious person, so this was God speaking to her, and he said, make flan. And she did not know how to make flan, but she figured she should listen. And so she called her niece, who was famous for flan, and made a couple of batches of it. It took 2 times to get it right. And she took that flan to the break room at Samsung and sold it for $5 or $6 a slice, and figured she had a business on her hands. After a month, she had made $500, I think. And from there, there are a couple of key turning points in her journey. Today, she is the owner of a storefront bakery, which I visited before the pandemic, in Lawrence, and she has about 16 employees who are all Dominican women. And she's a, kind of a fixture in her community and really part of the revitalization of Lawrence. So she's just a fabulous woman. But two key turning points in her story that I think that really shed light on some of the strengths and the barriers faced in this part of the economy. The first is that when she wanted to expand her business, the women around her said, "Why don't you bake cakes? That's what we need, that's what we want, and in fact, we'll teach you how to do it." And they came to her house and helped her learn how to bake cakes. And from that, she was able to take her business to the next level. But at that point, she was somewhat stuck, as women-owned businesses often are, either in the solopreneur phase, or they get a little bit stuck in the 1 or 2 employee phase. And she had another stroke of luck, which was that somebody told her, again, someone in her network told her about EforAll. And the way she describes it, she was just, I think, pretty scared, right? Because she didn't speak English very well. Then the programming she had heard was in Spanish, but she really felt out of her element. But it was at EforAll she made a connection with David that you're going to hear from in a little bit. And at EforAll that she learned how to take her business really to the next level, right? She figured out how to make it more profitable, and she got connected with mentors who helped her create get a loan from a CDFI, a community finance institution. And from there, she was kind of off to the races, right? It was still a long, hard slog. But I think this is important to recognize, because really we should not be asking women-owned businesses or anybody-owned businesses to start with $37 in food stamps and rely on like strokes of luck and twists of fate to enable them to grow the companies that we in fact need to power our economy. It doesn't make sense for them, and it doesn't make sense for us. And so that's ultimately why we ended up in the book weaving the story of Daenerys and EforAll through the whole thing, because this is in fact one of the key answers, right? That if you find the people who want to start businesses today and support them with networks, information, and finance, in fact, these businesses will be created. And that is exactly what EforAll does.
It's a great story. Someone posted the name of the bakery, or Seth did, Sweet Grace Heavenly Cakes, which folks should visit when you are in Lawrence, you said. Did I get the location right? We'll give Daenerys a plug here. We're going to pop up. We have some poll questions, which are really sort of trivia questions about entrepreneurship. So let's toss up the first one, which is about the percentage of entrepreneurs that are currently backed by venture capital in the United States. And we want to keep you audience members on your toes. So let us know if you think, is it less than 1%, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, more than 20. So since we mentioned and introduced David Parker and Desh Deshpande before, Desh, why don't we start with you, I guess, and say, you've built some pretty sizable, influential companies with, sort of leveraging the traditional venture capital model. When you look at kind of this challenge of there's lots of entrepreneurs that can't, are not going to successfully pitch a Foundry Group and Andreessen Horowitz for funding. Obviously, you've been trying to fill the void with EforAll. What else do you think we need to do? And maybe what are some ways this audience tonight can kind of, help nudge the boulder a little bit up the hill with us?
Yeah, Scott, I probably know you better from my tech avatar than the current avatar. And so, I think I started a company in the 80s. And in 80s, tech entrepreneurs, when they started with $37. And there was no ecosystem. The biggest venture capitalist in Boston had maybe $10 million fund at most, right? So the ecosystem was not there. But it's amazing what that whole ecosystem has done in the last 45 years, right? And so 15 years ago, when we started getting very active with the foundation, we said, what can we do? So the first initiative was more just like we had so much fun doing this technology entrepreneurships. Can we do things for creating more opportunities for tech entrepreneurs? And we did that, and we still do that. And we need to do that because that's what drives the GDP, GNP, a lot of the new things and everything else. But very quickly we realized that that thing that's creating so much success is also creating a big divide. And that divide is not going to be sustainable. And just like, if you have a hammer, you look for the nail. All I knew was innovation entrepreneurship. And so the idea was, can we use the same tool to actually create opportunities for the people who are being left behind? And there's going to be more and more of those people being left behind because, some people are going to be having fun automating, but there's going to be a lot of people who are going to get automated, right? And but I think to create a purposeful, meaningful life for them, they need to do the same thing. They need to get up in the morning and be excited. So this initiative was mostly to bring the same tool to the people who are being left behind. And, there's a few exceptions like Dinaris, who with $37 become successful. But just like we build the ecosystem for the tech entrepreneurship, we need to build the ecosystem for this segment of the entrepreneurship. And we took 45, 50 years to build the other one. Hopefully, my hope is that we can build this within 15, 20 years, because we know a lot of the elements that we need. We need good entrepreneurs, we need mentors, we need skilling, we need access to capital, access to market, and a lot of the new shared services that the tech entrepreneurs are developing can become a fantastic frictionless oil for these entrepreneurs to actually get going. So I think most of us on this call, if you belong to that community, you should become an entrepreneur. But the other people should think about participating as mentors, funders, anything they can do to really help that whole ecosystem.
Great, David. I'd love to first of all, maybe before we throw a question to you, can we look at the answers to that trivia question about what percentage of entrepreneurs are currently backed by VC? Let's see. I don't actually know if that shows the correct answer, but I'm guessing someone will tell me the correct answer. I don't have the answer key here. I just have the questions. Seth, Elizabeth, can you help us here?
Yeah, the correct answer is less than 1%. And so I'm kind of amazed Seth is going to back me up here, but I think that everybody in this room is super smart, because you generally all went on the low end. If we were talking to a tech audience, they would all have said more than 20%. Okay.
Elizabeth, also, they've all read your book.
Okay.
They've all read the book, which is great. So let's put up the next poll, which is about the fastest growing segment of business owners in the United States. And David, I'd love to just ask you a little bit more. We have a high-powered group here on this Zoom meeting. What else would you kind of urge people to do? I see Bobby Carlton mentioning in the chat, this is a group that has really high-powered networks, and so promoting local entrepreneurs, making introductions, sharing their stories on social media. Those are all great ideas. But given that you've been, you've been building EforAll for quite a while, what else? What are the next steps that we all can help with?
So thanks for asking, Scott. And it's great to be part of the panel. And thanks for letting us talk a little bit about EforAll and its model. EforAll's entire philosophy really is based upon not letting entrepreneurs feel like everything is on their shoulders. That's this sort of age-old myth of the entrepreneur as the brilliant, go it alone, fight the tide, and everything sort of follows behind them. But in reality, you talk to any successful entrepreneur and they always will talk about how many other people were critical for their success. And I think that holds a lot of people back, that myth, and thinking, well, I don't know the answers, so maybe I don't want to move ahead with this idea that I have in my head that I'd love to turn into a business, but I just don't have that confidence. And at EforAll, we want to create a network, right? We really want a community of people, as I like to put it, a giant bear hug for the entrepreneurs, so that they feel like no matter what situation they're in, and we all know they're going to face hundreds and hundreds of different circumstances, you know, the emotional highs and lows, the I don't know how to do this, or I want to hire somebody, and how do I ask somebody for money? It goes on and on and on. There's so many hats you have to wear as an entrepreneur, and it's almost impossible for any one person to know all of them well. And so you got to surround yourself as an entrepreneur with as many people as you can who can give you introductions, advice, guidance, a shoulder for you to sort of lean your head on if things aren't going well. It goes on and on. And so back to your question, like, what can people do is just get involved. Like, literally, like, find a program like EforAll, talk to the local businesses around you and ask them, what kind of help do you need? Do you have anybody advising you? Could I introduce you to anybody? In the last year, I think the entire country, or really the world, has seen the importance of small businesses. Like, they are so much part of the fabric of our local communities. And all of a sudden they were shut down, and we're like, what do we do now? Like, and I don't think everybody wants to go to Amazon. That's not necessarily the right answer. We love being able to walk into a local storefront or talk to a local service person and have them help us. And so you got to talk to those folks and offer them help in some way. If there's a program like EforAll in your community, then get involved. Like, it's not that much time, and it's so rewarding. Our mentors always say they get more out of working with our entrepreneurs than the entrepreneurs get out of working with them. So whether it's putting some hours in and helping folks just think about their business idea, yes, you know, investment is great. It's a little tough, to be honest with you, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, to invest in a small local business. Because there may not be an equity offering, right? Or it may be a loan. And so you got to figure out how to structure that in a gentle way, because entrepreneurs don't know what their cash flow is in the next year or two. So, you know, the funding is always a challenge. And we at EforAll really stress, you know, watching your pennies very closely and not overcommitting capital early, but step your business going forward so that you save some money and get some earnings from your first customers and keep moving forward. But there's lots of ways to get involved, but you got to take that action. You got to step out and do it. And I'm guessing much of the crowd listening tonight is already on board. And so it's our job to convince other people to get involved. And we got to talk up, you know, our work with our neighbors and friends and colleagues and say, you really got to do this too. It's fantastic for yourself, and it's fantastic for the community. So we got to get a movement, more and more people.
I mean, I'd love to ask Seth maybe, or Elizabeth, if it's a better question for you, Elizabeth, like other organizations like EforAll that you've run into around the country, right? My sense is EforAll is mostly a Massachusetts organization. Correct me if I'm wrong, Desh and David. Today, it's mostly Massachusetts.
You asked, so we're actually looking at a national footprint now, Scott. So we're in Colorado and launching in Buffalo, New York, launching in Rhode Island soon, launching in Northwest Arkansas, and talks underway in many different states. So ambitious growth plans across the country.
And Seth or Elizabeth, what else have you seen out there, right? Because just as there's not one solution to any problem, there's not one accelerator program for venture backable startups. Like, what else rose kind of to your attention?
There are a number of organizations that we talk about in the book, and actually some that we didn't. I would point out EforAll is pretty unique, both in terms of its scale. I mean, it's like the Techstars or Y Combinator of this segment. And so they're pretty unique in terms of scale and frankly, in terms of impact. But there are a number of other programs. I'm thinking about Camelback Ventures, Camelback Collective, Digital Undivided, Founder Collective. There's a handful that are OHub that are working with entrepreneurs of color that are working on all sorts of businesses, right? Sometimes tech businesses, sometimes more mainstream businesses, in many cases, businesses that might get venture funded or at least sort of angel funded, if you will. And in many other cases, businesses that won't and will get financing some other way. But there are many, many, many of them. But I think one of the challenges, and this is what we talk about, Silicon Valley, it's interesting, right? Silicon Valley takes credit for inventing a lot of things that it sort of co-opted from elsewhere. But one of the things that they really have perfected and that we should give them credit for is this sort of model of mentorship and acceleration. We talk about that in a bunch of different places in the book because it becomes so critically important. Businesses, David talked about this, right? And we describe this very clearly in the book, the bootstrap myth, and this notion, really kind of challenging notion that we have in the United States of this sort of solo lone entrepreneur who kind of pulls him or herself up by their bootstraps, which is really just, it basically never happens, right? Even the iconic entrepreneurs that we think about over the history of the United States have had partners, not to mention employees and other people that helped them along the way. I'm thinking Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and before that Rockefeller, and these people we think of as like superstar entrepreneurs all had partners who helped them out. So anyway, there's lots of great organizations out there, but we really could use to have more organizations like EforAll, and then as we've been talking about in the chat, supporting EforAll in this expansion. I've watched I was here when we came to Colorado as an organization in Longmont, which happens to be where I live, and I saw the impact of it, and continue to see that impact. And now we're bringing that to New York, to Buffalo, we're bringing it to Rhode Island, but many more communities could use the help and support of organizations like EforAll.
All right, cool. There's some good questions already popping up in the chat here, so I want to get to questions before our time is up. But let's bring in Luis from Juiced. Luis, if you're there, I saw that you disconnected and reconnected, but why don't you hop in and I'm curious how you heard about EforAll, and then tell us just a little bit about Juiced and what it is.
How you doing, everybody? Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I first heard of EforAll through the small business center in our community because I'm a member there. So I receive emails periodically, and it's a funny story because I was lying in bed going through emails real late at night, and it was like about 11 o'clock at night, and I seen something that said, you have an idea for a business, let us help you. So I said, okay, this is something that sounds interesting, what I need. So I said, let me fill out this application, right? What I got to lose? Don't have anything to lose. I fill this application. I wake up me and my wife wake up in the morning. I said, oh, by the way, I enrolled into some program. I'm waiting to see if we get accepted. So then she was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. We'll see. Right. We want to try to get this business started. So there we go. That's how I heard it.
Can I ask, what were you doing at the time when you applied? Were you working for someone else?
No, I used to be in the military since I was in high school. I did a couple years as a helicopter mechanic. I did 4 years in the military on U.S. Army. And then when I got out, my passion was to be a barber. So I was a barber. I still am. Have several barbershops and hair salons. So I'm from the hair industry. And like eating healthy. So it was something that was going on in my mind.
And one other question about Juiced. So was it really just you came to EforAll with the idea for it, and that really helped you get the business up and running? So you didn't have a location, you didn't have the funding for it. They kind of helped put the pieces together.
Yes, I feel like that was the great thing about EforAll. They helped me create a business when it was just a thought in my mind. So my wife and I had this thought about a healthy restaurant in our community because we live in what's called a food desert. So there aren't any healthy options. So with that, it was just a thought in my mind, in my wife's mind, idea of a healthy restaurant. So going to EforAll helped us put the pieces together to make our dream come to a reality.
That's so cool. I want to ask you one other question, and then we'll move into Q&A here. But I think we forgot to show the results of the last poll, which was about the fastest growing segment of business owners in the United States. And if you were one of the people who selected women of color. You are right. Women of color are the dominant force today in the US, which is amazing and surprising to some of us. I guess only I'm not trying to add up these percentages on this poll. So we have 80%, 20%, and 8%, which to me equals 108%. So maybe some people are allowed to choose two answers here, but I'm no math major, but some people are picking sort of hedging their bets, I think.
Scott, one thing that's worth actually jumping in and mentioning is really interesting to see those poll numbers. Obviously a very smart audience. I might have tipped it off when I did my preamble, but actually in terms of the age segment of the fastest growing ages that are starting new businesses, it's actually people 55 and older, which is something we talk about in the book. So that they're actually very correct in it's women of color. The fastest growing immigrants are also have historically always started businesses at a much higher rate than people born in the country. But actually, interestingly, and this trend has kind of changed a bit over time, but it's people over 55, just in terms of when you break out the age groups, that age cohorts that start businesses, that are the fastest growing.
Love it.
Lots of surprises in the new builders.
Yeah. So, hey, Luis, one last question that I have for you is just what's next for Juiced? I mean, is this kind of just I mean, obviously we're all aware of the labor challenges that every small business is dealing with in 2021. Like what's sort of on the horizon as you think about getting through the rest of this year?
Our goal is opening our third location. That's the goal right now. We have the location picked out. We're just looking at the build out, because the fact is, materials, lumber, and everything else is, gone through the roof, and the contractors are very busy. So trying to get them to work, in these difficult times when they're very busy is an obstacle that we have right now.
Scott, I'm trying to get Lou to start up Juice'd Café in every EforAll community.
And I'm down for that.
All right, that's good. You just got to hook him up with like a couple truckfuls of lumber, I think.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there's a question in the chat for you, Luis, about, let's see, I lost it here. I thought maybe did this question get deleted? Did I miss it here? Oh, Luis, how has EforAll helped you prepare for doing business during a pandemic? So in what way did they assist you? It's funny, I was at an EforAll event the week that everything shut down. And so I kind of have been wondering what EforAll has been doing for entrepreneurs trying to steer their way through the last 15 months.
EforAll is, so I had got out of the program many years ago, and EforAll was still there supporting me when I had questions and I needed people to talk to in the community. I could reach out to the people that run, the members that run our area, the South Coast, and they still gave me support. Phone calls, help me with the city to create more parking so people can come in and out of our restaurant even faster, because everything was we was running out, bringing meals to cars, and they helped us get a parking spot in front of the building, which was huge. And David's always been there for me to call. So visit Jeremiah. So they help us a lot. Love these people.
David, there's some questions for you about just the application process, and Luis referenced it, made it sound like it's maybe not quite like applying to college, maybe like a little bit slimmed down of an application, no SAT test. So can you give us a little bit of an overview and how the application process works?
Sure. So anybody who's interested, just go to eforall.org and then select the community that you want to be associated with to apply. It's free. All of our programming is free. And so there's an online application that asks some sort of very simple questions about you and about your idea. And then if you're lucky enough to make it to the next level, there would be interviews with EforAll folks on the ground. And these days, of course, all on Zoom. And so they'll ask you a bunch more questions about your application and make sure, quite frankly, that you're committed, because 95% of the folks who enter our program graduate from our program and start businesses. So We're not into I think it's an idea that maybe I'd like to run a business. I'm not sure. Can I join your program to test it out? It's like, no. You join EforAll because you want to start that business, and you, like Danaris, have that, like, I am going to do this, like, for me, for my family, whatever reason you have. We are going to help you, but it's your journey as an entrepreneur, and we are there around you to cheer you on and support you and introduce you and all that good stuff. But you're the CEO, you're in charge. So people have to be committed, and they have to convince us that they're committed. But once they're in, boy, they get that big bear hug that I mentioned. There's a lot of support from fellow entrepreneurs, from mentors, from specialists, from program people. It goes on and on.
I'm curious, Desh and Seth, maybe there's a question for you. There's a question about the history of EforAll and how long it's been around that, David, maybe you can answer in the chat. But Desh and Seth, like, is there advice you find yourself giving often to these entrepreneurs who are, outside of the traditionally venture-backed core, right? Where, they are potentially working a day job while they're trying to start a business, where where they may be just in a community where it doesn't feel like they know a lot of other entrepreneurs who have maybe built big companies and sold big companies, like just advice that you two find yourself giving often to entrepreneurs at that very early stage.
Yeah, Scott, I talked about how there's so many of us who were a part of building the ecosystem for the tech entrepreneurs. And a lot of those successful entrepreneurs are now getting involved with EforAll, right, as mentors and everything else. But a lot of it is very similar, but some is different. I think in tech entrepreneurship, you always start with the competitive advantage, what's unique, how are we going to compete, all that kind of stuff. Here, it's people really have to be very supportive in terms of the entrepreneur, because I think they are working against so many odds that you cannot you cannot just sort of look for meritocracy and excellence and everything else and get them very discouraged by throwing in all kinds of jargon and new words and everything else. So it's you have to be a lot more supportive, but a lot of the elements that they need are very similar. And I think, first of all, I'm very thankful to Seth and Elizabeth for spending a whole year of their life writing this book, because almost every tech entrepreneur ecosystem player I talk to is very excited and interested in doing this, but we don't have their mind share yet. Or even the government. The government spends about $4 billion a year on workforce development, right? But it's not workforce development anymore. You have to spend at least 10% of that money into job makers. It's not enough to just train the job seekers. And so I think we really need to, I think it's just the right time for a book like this to really get a lot of these other guys to come in and support it in a way that we did for the tech entrepreneurship, but also understand the nuances, like the question that you're asking.
I appreciate that, Desh. I'm gonna bring up something you said to us probably almost 2 years ago now, as one of our early conversations. We put something about this in the book, quoted you on it, because it really resonated with both Elizabeth and with me, which is that people in their communities have a deep and visceral understanding of the problem sets, right? These are not typically people in a business school class up at a whiteboard with, trying to figure out what a problem might be that they could go after and build a company around. These are people in community who really viscerally understand the problems around them and have ideas for how to solve them, right? And I think the power of organizations like EforAll is they turn these people that have wonderful ideas and they turn them loose, right? And they unlock their entrepreneurial potential that's already within them, right? And I think that's the really important point, is that there's so much agency and ability in people all over the country. And I think a large part of why Elizabeth and I wrote this book was we wanted it to be a call to action. We wanted it to be a rallying cry for new builders, right? To give them a name, give them that agency to go after it. And I think in a lot of ways, what organizations like EforAll do is they're not really training entrepreneurs. I mean, they surround people with mentors, and certainly they help people solve problems. But most of what they're doing is they're unlocking potential that already exists within people, and that's what's so compelling about the work.
I want to mention a couple things from the chat. So first of all, I'm supposed to mention that EforAll also has Spanish language programming, which we shared in the chat. Para todos, and it has its own URL that you can find there in the chat, aparatodos.org. Question, maybe a quick question for David about getting back to in-person. And is the program looking for people in Buffalo to be part of that accelerator rather than Buffalo people being part of the Longmont, Colorado accelerator? Like, is there a return to in-person programming that's on the horizon?
So like many other businesses and organizations, we learned a lot in the last year about sort of efficient delivery and best delivery practices. And so this summer, we're essentially fully virtual. And maybe by the end of the summer, we'll try an event or two that's in person. After that, we're going to hold on to the entrepreneurs meeting online, but we're going to still have a handful of local events where essentially the community can literally celebrate the entrepreneurs in person, and finding that that's going to be the right sort of hybrid, if you will, approach to for us to work with the entrepreneurs. And to the question of whether you could apply to be in a program from far away, the thing to keep in your mind is that who's paying for our program. We're a nonprofit. And we need the local community to say, we want EforAll or Para Todos in our community, and we're willing to put up the money to make that happen. And so we have to honor that this is the community themselves saying, we want this to happen. We want to help our local entrepreneurs, and we're willing to put money on the table to make that happen. And so as a result, our outreach efforts are very focused on that core community and then surrounding towns around it, where people have a chance to literally see their neighbors and fellow community members be successful and cheer them on and know that they were a part of it.
Great, thanks for that, David. I want to just highlight something Amanda added to the chat. I finished the book and it left me feeling so inspired about our work supporting and empowering entrepreneurs. Thanks for that, Amanda. And I'll hold up the book one more time, just so you know what to look for on Amazon, or even better, your local independent bookstore. Elizabeth, we have covered a lot of ground in not a lot of time. I wanted to give you the last word and just, leave us with a little bit of optimism, right? We're talking about a lot of, not just new builders, but a lot of infrastructure building that needs to happen around the country. And man, we haven't even started talking about outside of the US. So give us a little bit of optimism and your point of view about the future.
Well, I have lots of optimism, so it's not hard. So I'd say two things. I was listening closely to Desh when he was talking about the fact that this is just beginning to enter into the consciousness of people who have the power to create the infrastructure. And that is, Seth and I are pushing so hard on that, right? We've had an op-ed in Fortune, and we're going to have a piece in Quartz, and we're doing everything we can to push up this conversation into the national consciousness. So, thank you all for being here. And I know that you're helping in that effort. But the other thing I would say is that it's kind of a privilege to be here with people who are starting businesses and to see all the questions about how do you get into EforAll, where do I find an organization like this? Because what I can say from all of these years of reporting on businesses, large and small, tech, finance, globally, I can say that to me, like, the biggest heroes are always the small businesses. They are always the people like in the center of their communities doing the unnoticed but vital work to keep everything knitted together. And so if you're thinking about starting a business, I've been entrepreneurial. I have my own tiny publication as we speak. I think it's incredibly rewarding to have that kind of freedom, the ability to let your ambition go and to be part of building something and building in your community, however you define it.
I love that. A lot of great notes there to strike before we wrap things up. This has been a really amazing 45 minutes. I feel like I need to thank Julie at EforAll and Beth, who were the behind the scenes people that helped make this happen. Elizabeth, Seth, you guys were awesome. The book, once again, people who didn't get a free copy for participating in this, they are purchasable. The book is called The New Builders, Face to Face with the True Future of Business. David Parker, thank you also. Desh Deshpande, Luis Gonsalves. This is a really wonderful discussion, and I know there are more ahead. There's a lot more to talk about. Elizabeth mentions, as every author knows, Amazon reviews and ratings, very much appreciated. You don't have to have read every page of the book to give it a rating or review. Thanks, everybody. I also should mention one more time, eforall.org is the website where you can apply and learn more, maybe even donate a para todos for our Spanish speaking supporters. And thanks again for the time, everybody. I'll give you the last word, David.
Oh, thank you so much, Scott. And it's such a delight to be able to just talk about what we do. And Seth and Elizabeth, what you're doing with your book is fantastic. Just get the word out there that, and I think we're all starting to realize it. Small business is the future of American economy. And we have to all get involved and make sure that it's successful so that more and more people have that agency to be able to move forward and create a financial future, financial independence, and maybe wealth, because that business might be something that can get passed on or purchased. And we want to make sure these wealth gaps don't get worse and worse. And entrepreneurship is really the best way to deal with that, because you can you control it as the entrepreneur. You're not dependent upon somebody else to help you make this happen. So it's so great to have so many people care so much about entrepreneurship that EforAll is concentrating on. So it's been a delight. Scott, thanks so much for being part of it.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Great to see everybody in the chat. Thanks for all the awesome questions and comments.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lou.
Bye.
Thank you, Scott.
Have a great day.
Thank you.